fans, welcome into the Blue-White Breakdown with me, Max Ralph, and Johnny McGonigal alongside me here from Penn Live. Johnny, I know the vibes for you and me are a little bit higher right now, considering our baseball teams avoided some sweeps in the DS series. We'll see. Well, DS series is a little bit redundant in the DS, but
In the DS series, the
that's right. Yeah.
divisional series.
That's right. Well, I know we're feeling pretty good about that. We'll see if anything continues there. Chances are not high, but
Yeah, no.
not dead yet is, I think, the approach we'll take. Meanwhile, Johnny, I don't think the vibes are quite as high for Penn State fans, as Bob and I very thoroughly covered on Monday. Saturday was a disaster at UCLA, and we're a little bit wary about if things will change against Northwestern this weekend. And, it's almost certainly going to be a pretty hostile environment inside of Beaver Stadium. People were chanting to fire James Franklin before the Oregon game was even over. And after losing to UCLA, I fear that it may get a little bit ugly in Beaver Stadium. But Johnny, just wanted to check in with you because this is the first time you've been on the Blue-White Breakdown since the UCLA game. Wanted to check in on how you're doing, number one, and number two, give you a chance to kind of expand further on a column you wrote following the game.
Yeah, Max. Look, I'm doing well. Like you mentioned, the Phillies won last night. I was not expecting that at all, especially with Nola taking the bump early. But you got Christopher Sanchez now Thursday night. I'll be watching that game from the MetLife Stadium press box ahead of the Eagles-Giants game. Saquon facing his former team yet again. Just watched his documentary, by the way, this morning. Very well done on Amazon Prime. Thought it was really cool. Penn State fans will want to watch that too. There's a good moment or two in there about his time at Penn State. That Lions Den drill his freshman year where he juked out three guys. They interviewed James Franklin. He had a couple snippets in there. You're remembering fond times when it was, to be a Penn State fan, to watch Saquon Barkley and Trace McSorley and that, Big Ten title winning team.
Ironic timing for the documentary to come out, is it not?
Oh, well, I mean, of course, like they timed it up on the Eagles side, Eagles Giants side, like, the Eagles and Giants play tonight on Amazon Prime. So like, of course it was always going to come out this morning, but ironic times too for, Penn State because, the vibes were so high when Saquon was there. And I know that's a long time ago from now, but his emergence and Trace and Joe Moorhead, that offense, Chris Godwin, all of that 2016 season beating Ohio State, the 2017 team, how good they were, like that felt like it really took, James Franklin's tenure from, all right, we're building this thing in 2014 and 15 out of the sanctions to now, hey, Penn State is back. Penn State's here. Penn State is competing again to be a national power. And over the following seasons, 18, 19, 20 with the COVID year was kind of a wash. But, James Franklin and his coaches and the infrastructure at Penn State just continue to get better and they continue to build, really. But it felt like, looking back on it now, that they've kind of just evened out, that they've plateaued. That James Franklin and his time at Penn State has plateaued. That wasn't supposed to be the case this year. We talked about it all preseason, all off season. After they finally made they made the 12-team playoff last year, made the CFP semifinal. They beat SMU and Boise State to get there. Is that a big win on James Franklin's resume? Like, that's for the eye of the beholder. But they fall short again against Notre Dame. But in this offseason, this team, this program was supposed to be different. They weren't against Oregon. They lost another big game. But what James Franklin and his program, what they've done so well over the course of his time, even though they will lose to the Oregons and the Ohio States and last year Notre Dame's, they won't lose to the UCLA's. James Franklin's record against everyone else other than top 10 opponents going into that UCLA game was 122 at Penn State. Like, and a lot of that, again, was that COVID year and those early seasons, 14, 15. So for that loss, it just felt like an inflection point, for James Franklin in this program. And look, that's why I put out a column after the game that it's time for Franklin and Penn State to go their separate ways. That I don't think is going to come by virtue of him being fired because of that massive buyout. Right now, it's what, 56 million, and by January 1st or so, it could be down to 48. Either way, that is a healthy chunk of change. For anyone, it would be the second highest buyout in college football history behind Jimbo Fisher. And Penn State doesn't have the oil money that A&M has, but they also do have a $700 million Beaver Stadium renovation that is ongoing. That is, they're trying to raise money for that. So the buyout wouldn't necessarily happen, I don't think. But is this a point where James Franklin, at the end of this season, maybe takes a look in the mirror and takes a look at this team and takes a look at an angry fan base, most likely, unless they run the table, and says, you know what, like, maybe this isn't worth it. Maybe I have plateaued here. Maybe these fans aren't appreciating what I've done over the last 12 years, which is what he said time and time again, kind of living in the past a little bit, honestly. And go to a different program and go to an Arkansas or a Wisconsin, or, if Auburn fires Hugh Freeze, right? A Florida, if they fire Napier. So I know that's a lot. That is a not even a rant, but just a information download. But that's kind of how I feel. I feel like this has kind of plateaued, and I feel like both parties would be better off if they were to go their separate ways. That's not me saying that Penn State is going to land a phenomenal head coach and go win a national title within a few years, because what James Franklin has done has been really good, obviously. But I just think what you're getting at this point. And when you have a fan base that isn't satisfied with that, that isn't satisfied with 10-2, and you have an athletic director that's not satisfied with that either, frankly. I mean, Pat Kraft in February told us that, Penn State is committed to winning a national title in football. And if this wasn't going to be the year for James Franklin, I don't know when it is. I mean, the fact that they committed so many resources to the players, to the coaching staff. James Franklin said in July that this was his best combination of personnel that he's ever had at Penn State. And so if it's not going to happen this year, which they have a 1% chance of making the playoff right now, so it's not going to happen this year, then when is it going to happen? And is it better for him to try to make that happen elsewhere? And is it better for Penn State to try to make that happen with a different head coach? I think so.
Those points are all extremely valid. I mean, this is a program that built itself, like you said, on being at the lower end of that upper echelon of college football and of the Big Ten, where you don't lose the games you're supposed to win ever. And you have a chance to win the big ones, but you don't really get it done very often. And if you're not going to be able to take what you personally said is your best team in your 12 years and beat an 0-4 UCLA team, it's going to reflect on you. So yeah, I think there's perfectly good reason for fans to be a little bit tired of James Franklin. And I think, as you said, the only way that this happens is not him outright being fired. There are maybe some stipulations of, if he gets a new job and they can renegotiate the contract on his way out, the buyout is not as bad. Even if I think him and he gets a new job, maybe things offset a little bit depending on how much money he's getting over at the new place. Go ahead. Whatever you were going to say.
Yeah, I was going to say, if another team wants to come in and hire him, I think the entry buyout on that is only like $2 million.
Yeah,
for another team to come in, which is really nothing in today's college football when it comes to the coaching carousel. Which, by the way, while Billy Napier, they just beat Texas, maybe he's going to save his job, and maybe Auburn, beats Georgia this weekend. Hugh Freeze is in better standing, but overall, and this isn't just a James Franklin point, but it is connected. Overall, after last year, where, last offseason, where the coaching carousel was really quiet because a lot of teams were trying to figure out the revenue sharing and the new age of college football, where, these programs and athletic departments are paying their players. A lot of them were more hesitant to blow money on firing a head coach or going out and hiring someone new. I don't think that's going to be the case this offseason. I think you're going to see teams, now that they've figured out a little bit, at least, what's going on in this new rev share world, that they will be more willing to go out and fire their head coach. I mean, Arkansas already did with Sam Pittman. That was a dead man walking situation. We know Virginia Tech already did. Wisconsin is in really bad shape. If USC, I mean, I think USC is a fun team with Jade Mayava in that offense, but I mean, if they bottom out, which is a possibility, even Lincoln Riley could get the boot, and then USC. I mean, that's always kind of been that's always been like the James Franklin to USC has always felt like the perfect match. And if that happens, I mean, then I really think this thing could happen. And so, like, was the column I wrote, like, I don't think it was too reactionary, even though it was published like a couple hours after that UCLA game, because these were thoughts that I kind of came into the season with too. I didn't have thoughts that they would lose to UCLA, but I thought that if this season went sideways, if they lost to, as they did, Oregon and Ohio State and Indiana, and maybe lost at Iowa or something, like going into the year, I had these thoughts percolating, being like, if this season goes 8-4, or I mean, 9-3 is like maybe fine, but if this thing goes 8-4, even 7-5, like this should be on the table. Like, this should be something that is seriously discussed, because there are a lot of people who over the years, and even as recent as last year, when they lost to Ohio State, and the year before when they lost to Ohio State and Michigan, that the Fire Franklin crowd always kind of comes out. But it was so easy to brush it aside, because especially last year with the 12-team playoff, and in years prior to that, the anticipation of the 12-team format coming, it was like, okay, well, Penn State though is always kind of 10-2, and they get to a New Year's Six bowl and they win. Like, the 12-team playoff should benefit them more than anyone.
Yeah.
But when you start losing to teams like UCLA and losing the way that they did, I mean, being unprepared on special teams for that onside kick, the offense coming out extremely slow, the defense getting ripped to shreds, and the vibe of the team, you talked about it, Max, like last week being in practice, the vibes being down, after that Oregon loss. This is something that reflects on the coaching staff, that after years of preaching not letting one loss turn into two, they should be used to it by now. Like, James Franklin should know how to motivate a team. And the fact that they came out and looked so lackluster against, and like, no hyperbole or overstatement here, arguably the worst team in college football through 5 weeks, 4 games for UCLA, like, that's inexcusable. That is inexcusable. We don't have to go play by play for that UCLA game, because you and Bob did a great job of doing that, and K-Tron and all of that on Monday's podcast, which if anyone who's tuning in now, and I'm sure we have some comments or some questions, and we will throughout the show here, if you haven't checked that out, do that, because you guys did a great job of breaking down how that loss actually happened. But the fact that it happened in the first place is absolutely inexcusable, and is a reflection of the coaching staff, and is a reflection of kind of where this team is, and the disappointment that they couldn't get over that Oregon loss. When you go ahead and preach that, hey, our season's not over, And again, technically it's not. I mean, technically, look, they could run the table. They could beat Ohio. Like, they have the talent to do all these things. They had the talent in the preseason that I picked them to win the national title. So I was like, I'm going to be wrong, because I don't think they're going to do that. A lot of people thought this team was going to be different, and they do have a lot of talent. So sure, there is the sliver. You're saying there's a chance, hope that they can do this, and then all is forgiven. But after a loss like that, I mean, even if they go 10-2, they might not get in the playoff because of how bad that loss to UCLA was. That might be whereas James Franklin's buyout is prohibitive, that might be a prohibitive loss to getting into the 12-team playoff.
Yeah.
That's a conversation for probably 2 months from now, if and when Penn State is in that situation, which again, I do not believe they will, because this team has a lot of issues, and it's looking like the head coach is certainly one of them.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of schools in a lot of situations where a loss like this to UCLA may be forgiven pretty quickly. But just considering the context of James Franklin never getting over the hump, of he himself saying, this is the best personnel I've had in 12 years, and then going out and laying an egg like that, including, I mean, let's be real, they laid an egg against Oregon too, even though they pushed it to double overtime. The offense was horrendous, which we don't have to recount that again. But like I said, a lot of places, a lot of situations, this may be forgiven pretty quickly.
Yep.
Here, with all the history, with 12 years of doing this, it's not the case. I mean, I wrote a column last year heading into the playoff about Franklin, about the way that he kind of seemed to acknowledge the championship window that they had after Ohio State. You know, we talked about the fourth down, the fake punt against Minnesota. Talked about all the chances they were willing to take through the playoff stretch. We talked about even the confidence that like Franklin himself showed throughout that run. And I wrote this column and I said, James Franklin made a tangible change after they lost to Ohio State. He's more honest in the media about, how much that hurt him, whatever. He made changes on the field, was more aggressive, looked like he was coaching to win a national championship. And when you pair that with the success that he's had against lower level opponents, take out everything against Ohio State, Michigan, whatever, he put Penn State in the perfect position to succeed in the 12-team playoff because almost every year of his career before 2024, when the 12 team was enacted, Penn State was going to be in it. Like anytime he had a serviceable team, Penn State was in the 12-team playoff. I wrote a column that they were the perfect match for this scenario. And right now it's not looking that way because the coach scared again against UCLA and Oregon. You can't go out there and say, this is your best personnel and then lose to an 0-4 team, the first top 10 team to do it in 40 years. It's bad stuff. I will say, if they get this thing turned around the way they should, and they finish 9-3, 8-4 is maybe that might be a risk. You probably have to go at least 9-3. If somehow they shock the world and beat Ohio State and go 10-2, I'd say the odds are still probably in James Franklin's favor to be here if they're able to turn things around that quickly. But if he's going to leave, I don't think it's going to come with Penn State firing him. I think, as you said, it's probably a situation where he sees the writing on the wall, sees other openings. One of the many that you outlined could come available. Attractive jobs, for sure. And James Franklin is an attractive candidate, too. Yeah. I mean, think about the job that he's done at Penn State from where the program was when he took over to now we're complaining about going 9-3, 10-2 every season. James Franklin is an attractive candidate. If this thing does not get turned around right away, there probably is a world in which he is not the Penn State head coach next year. But I would say personally, at this moment on Thursday, October 9th at 12:21 p.m., I think the odds are still probably in his favor of being the Penn State coach next year. But there's a lot that has to happen before we get there. And you never know because they got to beat Northwestern this weekend, which is an interesting enough topic in itself with the way the team's been playing. Johnny, this is a live show. We got a lot of comments to get to. Just before we get to that, I wanted to kind of break down a couple of things from practice last Wednesday night and just a little more confusion from James Franklin for me. At first, he was asked about the offensive line, where Anthony Donko was listed as questionable, but came in and played in the second half at right tackle for Nolan Rucci. And TJ Shanahan started at right guard over him. On Monday, James Franklin said we were missing Donko this past week. We saw him practice last Wednesday, and he played in the game. So I'm not really sure what he was getting at there. Might have just misspoke. I don't know. Maybe they felt he wasn't healthy enough to start, and it was an emergency situation. Because then he did eventually come in. What's that?
I was going to say, or maybe they felt like they could get by without him.
Yeah. That's
oh, we don't need him in this game.
Yeah. I think that's a situation that is probably what happened. And then he comes in for Nolan Rucci, and he's asked about it at practice Wednesday night, and he basically says, well, that's kind of been our plan all year, is to get him reps at right tackle, get Rucci some rest, get Donko some rest, rotate those 7 guys we've talked about all year. And if we're healthy, we want to do that more. And he didn't really address the fact that he didn't start at right guard. So I don't know. That's something to keep our eyes on this week. The offensive line has not played very well to this point. So maybe the change was intentional. Maybe it was a product of injury. James Franklin was a little cryptic about it, as he has been with a few things this week. The other thing I wanted to bring up, talk about the linebackers, because as we've addressed, as Bob and I addressed on Monday, Dom DeLuca can't be playing 78 snaps alongside Amari Campbell. He can play a few, and it's serviceable, but they've got to find an answer, and that comes in some guys who haven't played football at Penn State, really. Keon Wiley, Anthony Specca, Cam Smith, maybe Alex Tash. And I asked James Franklin, I said, what to this point is holding them back from playing? Because, and I didn't say this, but in my mind, I'm saying, because it can't get a whole lot worse than what we saw at UCLA. And his answer, I've got it pulled up here. He says, we've got a new defensive system. It's a little more complex than we've used in the past. So if you put a linebacker or safety in any defensive scheme, but especially in ours, and they're not able to run the defense on a consistent basis, it's a problem. So safeties coach Anthony Poindexter talks about all the time. You make a mistake at safety, it costs you 7 points. If you're making mistakes at linebacker and you can't run the defense, it's hard to execute, no different than having that at the quarterback position and experience there. So those positions, it's magnified, but obviously it's going to be important for us moving forward. So there's kind of an admission at the end there that some of those young guys are going to play, and an admission that it's not good enough with DeLuca handling all those snaps. But at the same time, I just feel like it's a reflection on the coaching staff. If your answer about not being able to play Wiley, who's a redshirt junior, Specca, who's a redshirt freshman, sure, Cam Smith is a freshman. I can let that one slide a little bit because he's in his first year. But all the other guys we talked about have been in the program for multiple years. I think it's a reflection on the coaching staff if you're not comfortable getting those guys into the game right now.
It is. It is. Yeah. And that's the other thing too, is like, well, I mean, I spent a lot of time talking in consecutive seconds about James Franklin, and you know, everything starts, as he would say, starts and ends with him in terms of, you know, whenever he takes responsibility, whenever something bad happens, that's what he always says. But it's also, a lot of this is on the assistant coaches too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, ultimately he hires them, he empowers them to do what they do. But, you know, that there are issues abound with this roster. It's not just at linebacker. It's not just on the offensive line, although, you know, those are the two of the biggest glaring issues right now. Wide receiver is another one.
Yeah, so I've got some notes to say on that one too, Johnny.
Okay, because I was going to say, because when I went back and rewatched the UCLA game, there was a lot of lollygagging out there, you know, and not just in run blocking either. So that reflects poorly on Marcus Hagans, who feels like he's been on thin ice already. You know, in terms of Drew's development, I mean, Danny O'Brien, we mentioned him last week. Obviously, Phil Troutman on the offensive line, and Dan Connor being a first-year linebackers coach, like, and losing a Tony Rojas is something that is very difficult. It's not like, you know, when we talk about the assistant coaches and the jobs they have or haven't done, you know, it's not like Drew Allar got hurt and it's like, oh, well, you know, Danny O'Brien has to coach up, you know, Grunkmeyer. Like, it's like the issue there at linebacker is understood and understandable. But yeah, overall, and then Jim Knowles being the biggest one, like, you know, just not. Whether it's not spying Nico until late in the game, whether it's having a defensive scheme that takes too long to implement and have these guys understand. And I know that when he came over, Ohio State reporters and fans were saying a lot that, like, hey, this is something that does take time. It's something that they experienced when he first came to Ohio State, and took a little bit. But I mean, there are issues abound on this team, many of which led to you know, losing to a team like UCLA under those wild and shocking circumstances. So yeah, a lot for this group to figure out.
Yeah, absolutely. So your point about the wide receivers, because yes, I will hold that I think that this group of wide receivers is more talented than Penn State has had in a while, but it certainly seems like there is a lack of consistency that causes some problems. And who knows where that comes from? Maybe it's frustration with play calling, maybe it's poor coaching, maybe it's simply on the players. It could be a combination of things, but James Franklin comes into the year and he says, we're deeper at that position than we have been before. We hear so much good stuff about not only the 3 high profile transfers, which we expected to play well, but a guy like Tysier Denmark, who had some buzz last year and comes in the second year in Andy Kotelnicki's offense and can probably get some run. Obviously, we've heard about Liam Clifford for a long time with little production, but a veteran guy who they've said good things about. And then freshman Kobe Howard. That's your top 6. That's your quote-unquote varsity group. And James was asked last night pretty specifically about Tysier Denmark and Kobe Howard. Says, is it hard to evaluate them because of lack of game reps? Like, what's going on there? And I think this is really telling. And as I said with the linebacking group, I really think this is more a reflection on the coaching staff than anything else. But James Franklin says, we're in a position right now where we don't have plays and drives to just throw somebody out there and see how it goes. We've got to get our best guys on the field. Every rep is like gold. Every drive is like gold, and we've got to maximize that. And I just, you spent a lot of time talking about a Kobe Howard, a Tysier Denmark. Every time we talk to a defensive guy and we say, who's giving you trouble? Kobe Howard's name comes up. This guy is talented. Tysier Denmark has some open field ability. God, if you need a spark, like, why not give it a try? And they're not doing it. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's Marcus Hagen's not being able to develop them. I don't know if it's Andy Kotelnicki's scheme not fitting these guys the right way. I don't know if it's James Franklin being loyal to guys they spent a lot of money on in the transfer portal. But that's the other thing is you can still play those three and get the young guys some reps. They played like 7 total snaps between the two of them all year. I don't know if that's the exact number, but I'm pretty sure Tysier Denmark had 4 in one game and Kobe Howard had 1, and that's the most they've played all year. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and on the flip side, the fact that every rep is like gold, when referring to, Pena, Devontae Ross, Kyron Hudson, the fact that every rep is gold, 5 games into the year when you had an entire summer to work with these guys, maybe that's a little bit informed by how poorly things went in the non-conference or how disjointed and out of sync and out of rhythm things looked at times against Nevada, FIU, and Villanova. But that's an indictment in and of itself. The fact that the fact that they feel like they can't give Kobe Howard reps or Tysier Denmark reps because they need to continue to work with these guys that this isn't already ironed out and sorted out. Also, it's a reflection of the fact that, hey, all these reps are like, oh, we need our best players on the field moving forward because we just lost to UCLA and we have 2 losses now. Yeah. That hey, we can't be working in these freshmen now. We need to maximize every rep because we put ourselves in a situation, in a position now that has to be the case, that we can't be focused on development. Maybe if they lose 2 more times, maybe if they lose at Iowa, lose to Ohio State, it's like, oh, who cares? Like, let's get the freshmen in now. So maybe that changes. Maybe that changes.
Audition for the transfer portal coming up next year.
Yeah. Look, I don't like, I say that a little bit facetiously, but like maybe his thinking on that changes in a month or a month and a half, depending on how things go. But the fact that they're in this position now is just, it's just bad. It's just not
really bad. It's really bad. Johnny, like I said, live show. Drop us some questions if you have them, some comments. We'll get to our predictions for Northwestern at the end, as always. But there are a couple of questions I want to get to. Let's see. Somebody asked, why hasn't Franklin been fired yet? I think we kind of answered that at the beginning. You're definitely going to give him a chance to get this right at the very least. And the buyout is not something that makes sense to fire him in season. Okay, here's a topic that we've discussed on a couple of podcasts, but I kind of want to address it again because it does keep coming up. Allar clearly doesn't fit this offense. Why did they hold on to him over Bo? I think it was 2 weeks ago that we talked about this. I don't buy into that. I don't. I think it's much less about Allar not fitting the offense. I think it's more about Andy Kotelnicki not fitting the offense around him and his talent right now. I mean, James Franklin feels it's a pro-style offense, and I mean that's true. There are things where Allar's legs are better than people realize, and I just don't think that they've used them properly to this point. And you saw that against UCLA, where people should have nothing to complain about with Drew Allar from the UCLA game. I mean that.
In the second half, when he's already down by 20 points and has to fight back, because that's when we've seen the best out of Drew Allar is when his back is against the wall.
But Johnny, and here's the one thing that I will say though, because yes, while almost all of their points came in the second half, they didn't touch the ball in the first half until there was 7 minutes left in the first quarter, and the defense could not get off the field. I mean, even at the end of the game, I think UCLA had 37 minutes of possession, like well over half of the game.
Well, dude, we haven't discussed. Yeah. I was going to say, we haven't discussed this yet, but when Rick Neuheisel joined the CBS broadcast for
Yeah,
one drive, and it felt like 45 minutes
it
because
was forever.
that's how long UCLA's drive was at that time in the first half. So I take that point. I understand that point. Yeah, to kind of put a bow on that Drew question. Yeah,
Yeah.
Andy Kotelnicki's offense it has a lot of window dressing. It has a lot of movement, pre-snap, all that. At its base, it is similar to pro style. I don't think it's the system fit necessarily. I think it's everything else around it. It's Andy's play calling has been suspect. Post Tyler Warren, it looks at times that he doesn't know what he's doing, or at least is confused as to what is going to work best. The offensive line has been poor, relatively speaking. The running game, not necessarily Katron Allen, because he's been great.
But
Nick Singleton,
I think the personnel issues contribute.
Yes. And then Drew, because we can't give him a pass on any of this. Like, it feels like, and I've gotten this before where people think that I will blame everything else except for Drew Allar and his shortcomings. No, because he clearly has not improved to the point where he needs to improve over the offseason, or at least that is what we've seen through 5 games. So I don't think it's a system fit. I think it's a player and personnel the execution issue overall.
I'm with you. I mean, look, and my point was, like, Drew played his best game of the season on Saturday, but that doesn't mean that he didn't kind of play like crap, for 3 games before that, especially in the Oregon game, But against UCLA, he played well. I think that's a universal truth. He played well. Touchdown to Kyron Hudson was a great ball. He had a career high in rushing yards, keeping the defense honest. It's something Penn State should do more this season. So yeah, you and I have talked about this before, but it keeps coming up, so worth addressing again. I don't think Bo Prabula was a better fit here. I don't think Penn State wins that game against UCLA if Bo Prabula is on the team. I don't think they beat Oregon if Bo Prabula is on the team. And Bo gets his first real test of the season against Alabama this weekend. We'll see how it goes. This is also an aside, but I just want to say I see a lot of people complaining on social media about why do Penn State receivers go and be productive as soon as they leave. Trey Wallace had a great 2 first games. He's had 2 catches for less than 30 yards in his past 2 games, and Amari Evans only has a catch in 2 games this year. Let's just pump the brakes on that one. I'm not defending Marcus Higgins or James Franklin or Andy Kotelnicki by any means, but let's just pump the brakes on saying that those guys have become stars elsewhere, because they haven't. So I just want to get that out.
Yeah, and one more to add to that, Keandre Lambert-Smith put up numbers at Auburn last year because Auburn was losing by 3 touchdowns in almost all of its games, and Hugh Freeze loves to throw the ball. So, I mean, he's a fine player. He's in the NFL. I think he's with the Chargers on the practice squad or down the roster. He's fine, but let's not like sit here and say that these wide receivers who transfer out are going and becoming unbelievable NFL stars after the fact. They're not.
Yeah. Here's a good question that unfortunately I don't know that we have a great answer to. But somebody asked, was it Stan Drayton, Andy Kotelnicki, or James Franklin who decided not to put Katron Allen on the field for the 4th and 2 against UCLA in the final minute of play? It wasn't even used as a decoy, which if you guys didn't see the Monday podcast with Bob, I blew up over that sequence. It's the most frustrated I've been on this podcast all year because it's just mind-boggling. James Franklin was asked pretty directly who makes that decision, who puts them in, and he didn't really give an answer on Monday. He said when asked if Katron will be used more, he said it's always a discussion. It's something we talked about before and after the game. It's something we plan to. He didn't even say it's something we plan to do. He said it's a discussion, and so that doesn't really tell me that it's actually going to happen. But then let me find the quote. He was asked specifically about who makes that decision. Let me find it. I'm scrolling through my old Otter here. Johnny, if you have anything to add, go for it while I look at this.
No, just to reiterate your guys' conversation for Monday. I mean, talk about inexcusable.
Yeah.
The fact that a guy who is averaging 7 yards a carry isn't on the field. And that was, by the way, a little plug here. I talked to Dane Brugler from The Athletic, who is, I think, probably the most knowledgeable, well-sourced NFL draft expert out there. He's got an eye for evaluation. He's in the ear of a lot of scouts across the league. And I talked to him about Penn State's players. And there was a piece on Drew Allar, kind of the struggles, what the deal is with him, where his NFL draft stock stands. That's a mouthful. So check that out if you haven't. But also, I asked him about Nick and Katron, and he basically said, "Look, like this year, there is one player on Penn State's roster, NFL draft prospect wise, for the 26 class, that is outperforming preseason expectations, and it's Katron Allen." He's like, he looks quicker. His vision is always there, but has looked really good. And he said, look, Nick Singleton is the better athlete. Katron Allen is the better running back. And when it comes to getting 2 yards on a 4th down, you should probably have your better running back on the field.
Yeah.
Point blank.
Yeah.
That's just what it comes down to.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the point that we've made ad nauseum over the past 3 weeks. Johnny, I found the quote. So James Franklin was asked pretty specifically, who makes this decision? He says, we discuss rotation as a staff every single week. That's part of the coordinator's plan. That's part of the position coach's plan. And for us, we're tracking touches more than we're tracking plays, which I think, as you just made a point, and as I pointed out on Monday, them even being on the field makes the defense worry about Katron Allen being there. Those guys are essentially rotating by series, but we're tracking touches. And obviously that was a discussion after the game. It was also a discussion before the game that we need to get Katron more touches and more carries. If it was a discussion before the game, it didn't play out that way because Nick Singleton touched it 12 times to Katron Allen's 9. And it's not good. Like I said, I appreciate the question that we got here, but we don't really have an answer for it. I don't know if it's, somebody mentioned maybe it's an NIL thing. Obviously we don't know the details of Nick's or Katron's package to persuade them to come back. I think it's at the bare minimum, if that isn't a factor, it might be a loyalty thing. You know, Nick Singleton, as James Franklin said early in the season, he's done a lot of good things here, and we don't want to diminish that. I mean, you're right, but you need to beat teams, and Katron Allen gives you the best chance to do that. I don't know.
Yeah, I was going to say, James Franklin tends to think back on the past a little bit too much for my liking, just to be honest with you. I mean, again, like from when he talks about, you know, not letting 2 losses define his tenure and override or overshadow what they've done as a program over 12 years, it's like people don't want to hear that. When he's talking about, Nick Singleton has done a lot of really good things for this program, and he certainly has. But like that should not override the fact that the better running back is getting fewer touches in a game you lost.
Yeah,
that just can't happen. Katron Allen has told us before he wants the ball. He likes the ball.
Well, Katron likes the ball.
Give the man the ball.
Yeah,
just give the man the ball.
Feed the fat man.
I think this weekend, Max, during those pregame player introductions for the Northwestern game, which again you mentioned is homecoming, so there's going to be a lot of, and it's a 3:30 kick, so there's going to be a lot of young alums in the stands who were tailgating all morning and are going to be pretty upset. I think the biggest cheer is probably going to be for Katron Allen.
Good chance, yeah.
And we all know what's going to happen when James Franklin announces, James Franklin, head coach, Penn State. We know what's going to happen there.
It's not going to be good. Okay, we got another question. I don't know necessarily how specific I'm supposed to get in answering this, but it's a fun one. Okay. When are we going to have a guest appearance from Dave Jones? I don't want to spoil anything, but y'all should probably stay tuned on our YouTube page on Friday, October 10th. Is all I'm going to say. I'm going to leave it at that.
This is news to me. This is news to me.
Johnny, you haven't been in the Slack channel today then.
I guess I haven't.
You got to get in the Slack channel.
I was too busy watching the Saquon doc.
I know, but I do think I think that's probably going to get some people riled up. I don't know if I was supposed to spoil that or not, but it came up, so I'm going rogue today, Johnny.
I love it.
Okay, DeLuca is not the answer at linebacker against Big Ten caliber athletes. Has the staff given up on Keon Wiley? kind of already answered that earlier in the show. I hope that answer was satisfying because we don't really see what's going on either. Like that's the thing, and I'm gonna get to more of these questions, Johnny. But I just like all these questions are the questions that we've asked James Franklin and the coaching staff this week, and we don't have answers for it. And that's the frustrating part. And you can't expect any coach to come out and say, oh, we're going to run 12 personnel on 35% of our plays, and Katron Allen's going to be the back on 19 of 20 of those. You're not getting that. You're not getting the play call. Like, but that's not what we're expecting. It's like I want you to say, yeah, we didn't do a good enough job of getting our linebacker depth ready. We didn't recruit well enough. Or you're not going to say that because you can't diminish the guys that are in the room. But you need to take responsibility and say, we didn't do a good enough job of getting the depth ready. We will be playing some of them this week, or they're getting more time in practice this week. And it's like he's almost saying that, but he's kind of talking around it. And I wish that I had better answers for the people in the comments, but I don't. Yeah. So that's where we're at. I'm looking for other things. I think we got through. Oh, here's one. This is one that I saw that I wanted to get to because it's something that I've been thinking about as well. What's going on with Zane Durant? He has been ineffective. That's true. And I wrote about it in my stock watch this week that published this morning, Thursday morning. He was one of my players trending down at Penn State because this guy is a preseason All-American, and he has 1.5 tackles for loss, 1 sack, and an extra half a tackle for loss. Look, there are aspects of it where he is drawing more attention than he was before. I don't think people really appreciated Devon J. Thomas and Keziah Izzard enough for what they did last year, because those are two bigger bodies who really help stop the run. And then Zane is able to kind of do his thing getting after the passer, which is what he's best at as a defensive tackle. He's undersized, like plain and simple. He's a strong, powerful guy, but he's undersized. And if he's taking on double teams, I mean, he was getting pushed back against UCLA, which is just not a good offensive line. And he's not getting after but that's the other thing, is he's not getting after the passer as much as I would have expected when he's facing one-on-one rushing situations. So I don't know how it went down. Part of it is I don't think he's as well equipped to handle a double team. I don't think he's big enough, disruptive enough to kind of do it alone in the run game. And his counterparts, like Alonzo Ford's a bigger body. He does a good job there. But Xavier Gilliam and Ty Blanding are kind of Zane Durant models. Like they're the Zane Durant prototype. So I don't think he's getting as much help as he was before. And I don't think that he's the kind of defensive tackle that's capable of like carrying a defensive line, is kind of my take on the situation.
Yeah, and I agree with all of that. Just one other thing to add. When we saw him at his best last season, not only did Penn State have denied Dennis-Sutton off the edge, but they also had Abdul Carter off the edge. And if you're talking about players that take attention or command attention from an offensive line, from tight end chips, from keeping guys in to protect, if you're doubling or focusing on Abdul and deny, that focus is not as much on Zane Durant. And now without Abdul Carter, now I like what I've seen, from Chaz Coleman in spurts and Zariah Fisher in spurts, but they're not Abdul Carter. And so I think that plays a factor as well, in addition to everything that you said, which I agree with, because NFL scouts are going to look at that Oregon tape, Max, and they're not going to like a lot of what they saw. Their interior guards were swallowing Zane Durant up, especially in the run game.
Yeah, I mean, as bad as the linebacking play was against UCLA, the defensive line was more damning against Oregon. And it's just because I really think Dennis-Sutton's out there doing it on his own. Like he is battling, he's winning a lot of the one-on-one reps that he has. And I'll also say Dennis-Sutton is one of the most intense individuals that we've seen come through Penn State. Like that guy loves the grind and like loves playing football, much like Abdul Carter did last year. Like some similarities. I like he's playing well, but he's really the only one that's causing concern for defenses in the entire front seven. And quarterbacks are able to scramble. You're able to run up the gut, and it's just not a good situation. Somebody just said something funny. Big Ten Spirit joke that Dave Jones will be wearing a UCLA t-shirt in the thumbnail of the video. I don't think that's the case. However, I do feel the need to
I
say
don't
now
know.
that you've brought that up, I'm wearing a UCLA color sweatshirt right now. It's not. It's a Cubs sweatshirt. I feel like I probably should get that out of the way.
You're a
Because
Cubs fan? I didn't know that.
I know I had no idea.
I had no clue.
And they play today. I think I might have mentioned it, but
Yeah.
anyway, it's not UCLA. I'm not having any bias here. So I think that's funny. We're in our 45th minute, Johnny. Let's get to some predictions. Yeah.
Let's do it. Yeah.
All right. As always, I'm going to go through what Bob Flounders and Joe Hermit said first. And I will say we're all kind of on the same page with this one, which is either scary or a good thing. I don't know. So Bob Flounders broke the mold. Usually we do players on the spot, and he goes coaches on the spot. And he basically says it's on James Franklin, Andy Kotelnicki to make sure somebody pounds the table for Katron Allen in the run game. Absolutely true. Don't be surprised if Jim Knowles tweaks his defense to get linebacker Amari Campbell more help versus the run. That could look like a lot of different things, but that's Bob's prediction. Would he be shocked if Penn State lost this game? No, not after watching what happened at the Rose Bowl. Lions got to get their skill players more involved. He likes Penn State 26, Northwestern 10. Joe Hermit, our photographer extraordinaire, his players on the spot, more or less the same thing in a different tone. What he asked about Penn State's identity, thought it was going to be smash mouth running football behind two really good senior running backs and the best O-line in decades. Hasn't played it out. Katron Allen is the only one who's doing it and hasn't been utilized nearly enough. Time to get back to basics and pound the ball with Allen. Don't be surprised if the Wildcats follow UCLA's lead and throw the kitchen sink at PSU. Trick plays, fourth downs, aggressive play calling, whatever it takes. His pick, has there ever been more pressure on a team that is a 22-point favorite? Probably not. That's a great point. We'll find out about the character of this team as they're going to hear boos and chance to fire the head coach before the game starts. And he goes Penn State 31, Northwestern 10. Johnny, lay it on me.
Yeah, I mean, I've got the same exact score prediction, Penn State 31, Northwestern 10. So we'll start with that. Joe and I, if that happens, we'll celebrate that as a dub because in terms of our predictions, and this is more staff-wide, but I mean, I'm also the one who picked the widest margin of victory for Penn State against Oregon. I haven't had many dubs this year in terms of the predictions, but that's on Penn State for not covering a single game so far.
That's right, Johnny. You shouldn't take any.
That's not my fault. No, no. Look, my players on the spot. I went a little off the grid with Penn State's defensive backs. Penn State they haven't forced a turnover in the last two games. Obviously, both losses going up against a quarterback. And I mean that's not ideal, especially when you have a secondary that. Saki Wheatley is this ball hawk, right? And AJ Harris, I think, has been good as a cover corner, but still, you would like to see some production in terms of takeaways, turnovers from that group, from that secondary. And they're facing a quarterback in Northwestern's Preston Stone, who was at SMU last season. Ends up losing the job to Kevin Jennings, who Penn State saw in the first round of the CFP. Preston ends up transferring to Northwestern, throws 4 picks in the season opener against Tulane, 2 picks against Oregon, a few weeks back. So there should be opportunities for Penn State secondary to make its mark in this game. Don't be surprised if, similar to what Joe said, just a few trick plays, specifically on offense, for Northwestern. Wouldn't be surprised if they try to pull an onside kick or something crazy, a fake punt or something. But this is a Penn State defense that we've seen, alignment, communication, just kind of vibes issues out there in terms of not being totally on the same page under Jim Knowles so far this season, especially last week. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see Northwestern try to take advantage of that and make a splash play or two. And then, my prediction, it's impossible to be confident in any prediction after what happened at UCLA. But I think Katron Allen, I think finally the clamoring for him will get through. He'll score an early touchdown and kind of put the crowd that's just going to be almost like some of them, at least, and I know some in the student section certainly, who started that Fire Franklin chant, in the Oregon game. A lot of people in the crowd are going to be itching for the opportunity to boo and to be upset. It's I was having this talk with Audrey Snyder a few weeks ago, and it's something that we kind of both understood for a while. But it's interesting when you talk about the fan base, with Penn State, because there's obviously a lot in Center County and in central Pennsylvania, but you also have a lot of Pittsburgh people who love their football and let people know about it. There's a lot of Philly folks who, we know, love to boo. There's a lot of there's a lot of fans of this team that are not afraid to let the team hear it, just based on their allegiances elsewhere. And I respect and understand that, certainly. I think Penn State will limit that this Saturday and with their play early and just kind of grind out methodically a comfortable win.
Yeah. I like it. You're, as you said at the top, you're going Penn State 31, Northwestern 10 as well.
Yep.
For my players to watch, something we really just talked about, deny Dennis-Sutton and Zane Durant. I'm going with the defensive line. Those two were potential All-American picks. Zane was a preseason All-American. And the defensive line in general just hasn't been as dominant as it needs to be, especially in controlling the quarterback, where Nico Iamaleava ran wild and Dante Moore did just enough to extend plays and, pick up a couple first downs and everything. Northwestern's Preston Stone is not those guys, but he can run a little bit, and Amari Campbell needs some help against that. Don't be surprised if Penn State's defense struggles to get off the field once again, but makes up for it with a few turnovers. Northwestern is 22nd nationally in third down conversions. Good rate, but is 10th worst in turnover margin, as you said. Preston Stone really struggled in the first week of the year and then threw 2 more picks against Oregon. So against a good defense, which on paper Penn State's hasn't necessarily played out that way. But he might be in trouble. My pick, if you told me 2 months ago that I'd have to think about predicting a Northwestern Penn State game in Beaver Stadium this hard, I'd cackle. I'd laugh at you. But here we are. Northwestern isn't particularly good, but David Braun's teams tend to stay in the fight and muck things up. Penn State's 2025 team has not shown that it will handle that well. Give me the Lions in a surprisingly close one. I went Penn State 24, Northwestern 10. And Johnny, I didn't look at yours and Joe's predictions before I sent that in. I was sitting there and I'm like, man, that feels close. They could pull away at the end. Maybe I'll go 31-10. And I ended up not doing it, but I just want you to know that I am also on the same page as you and Joe. So, we're either going to go down together or we're going to be riding high, all three of us. We'll see. But either way, we don't have Penn State covering the spread this weekend.
Correct, because it's what, 20? Is it 22?
I think it's 22. I'm pretty sure it's 22. Maybe 22 and a half, but here, I'm looking it up. Yeah, it's 21 and a half or 22 and a half. So you're right on the line there.
Right on the number.
Yeah.
I didn't even look that. I mean, I didn't look that up before making my score prediction. So
that just means you're right. You're in tune. That's what you're clairvoyant with it,
Yeah. I don't know if that's a good thing.
Well,
but
I don't know. Maybe it means ball. Maybe that's all it means.
Maybe. Intrigued to see what happens this weekend. Aside from the off-field stuff and the reception and all that, you need to see this team actually just win comfortably. First of all, win, because who knows what the hell could happen, in any of these games after what happened at UCLA. But just I know that a lot of conversation that we had was around Franklin and around the expectations being fallen short of and everything. But look, they've got Northwestern this week. They've got Iowa coming up, Ohio State coming up. These players are still going to be they're not going to give up, or at least some of them, most of them, maybe some will. Who knows there, but they still feel like they can make something of this season. And so this is an opportunity on Saturday to kind of go flex your muscles and go show what you can do and try to bounce back because they have to. They have to, because if they don't, then we're talking about one of the most disappointing seasons in college football history. If they go out and lose to Northwestern, they certainly cannot let that happen.
Yeah, things should change this weekend, but if somehow they dropped this one. I think we'll start to be talking about things changing in a much bigger way next
Yeah.
week. Couple of fan predictions here. Penn State 27, Northwestern 17 from DFD LA. And then another one, which I can't help but laugh, not because I don't think it's possible, but just because I think it's funny. Halftime Northwestern 14, Penn State 3 from Air 5503. And then they also predict Singleton 14 carries, Fat Man 8 carries. I just I don't know. You had to be laughing when you wrote that too. Like a sadistic kind of laugh, like not that it's a good thing, but just that it's painful if it's going to happen again. There's no reason that it should, as we spent a lot of time talking about this week on both today's edition of the Blue White Breakdown and Mondays with Bob Flounders. Like I said, there might be a special edition coming tomorrow with a special guest on Friday, so make sure you stay tuned for that. This has been a fantastic live show. Love to see the comments from everybody. We love to answer your questions. Keep them coming next week and every week afterward. I think this season, in a way that we weren't expecting to, is going to have a lot to talk about for the rest of the 7 regular season games and whatever the postseason may look like for Penn State, if there even is a postseason. And so, yeah, make sure you're tracking with us. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow us wherever you typically get your podcast. Subscribe to PennLive.com. Lots of good stuff over there, especially, as Johnny mentioned, some talk with Dane Brugler, NFL draft expert, who has some good insight on some of the personnel matters that we were talking about. So tons of good stuff. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you keep following along